So you're thinking about buying a Z Fold 4, but probably one of the biggest questions on your mind is, what is that crease like? Let's talk about it. So if you watched my last video, you'll know that I traded in my S22 Ultra for the Galaxy Z Fold 4. And if you're like me, this is my first folding phone. Also, if you're like me, you did way too much research before you bought the phone. And one of the things that comes up in every single folding phone review is the crease. Now with the original Z Fold, Samsung really was the option, but now there's more and more makers that are addressing that crease. And the talk I've heard about the Z Fold 4 is that it's better, it's not better, it's bad, it's all over the place. So let me tell you my personal impressions of the crease. Now some people might say that in certain conditions you just can't see the crease, and it's only really evident in certain angles or certain lighting. So first things first, there's definitely a crease, and how noticeable it is dependent on what you're doing with the phone. The worst case scenarios are either a completely black screen or a completely white screen. On a completely black screen, you can see every bit of reflection that comes out of that crease. And on an all-white screen, you'll see that once you're a little bit off axis, the brightness of some of the pixels change, and it's fairly noticeable. Now, of course, those are not your typical situations to be using the phone. People will say that if you're using it normally, you won't see the crease. I can see the crease in pretty much any situation, any lighting. However, I don't always notice the crease. Now, that's an important distinction. I would say the situation where it's hardest to see the crease is watching live action video. In that situation, there's a lot going on, so there really isn't a lot that highlights the crease. But if I pay attention enough, I can see it. I can actually see a little bit of depth in that area, and I can tell that there's a crease there. But seeing the crease and noticing the crease are two different things. So think about when you're reading a book and you're into it enough that you no longer see the words. All you're seeing is the world built by the author. That's a little bit of what happens with the crease. When you're engrossed in whatever it is that you're doing, you really don't even notice the crease, even in situations where it might be a bit evident. I've noticed that animation tends to show it more since there's more straight lines and solid blocks of color. And as you can see on a grid, you can kind of tell where that crease is, even if it's not being highlighted by some lights or having some sort of brightness change. So if somebody tells you you can't see the crease in a certain situation, I would say they're just not noticing it, which is kind of the same thing. But if you're detail oriented, you will see the crease pretty much all the time. But whether or not that matters to you, or whether or not you notice it when you're involved in whatever you're doing, that's a different story entirely. I would say the content to me that shows it the most is reading comics or reading books. And in both of those situations, it's a static image, so that crease can kind of pop out a little bit more. But also say in both of those situations, the media that I'm consuming kind of absorbs my attention, so I don't notice the crease. And even if I did, having that extra bit of screen real estate for these particular use cases is invaluable. I really can't see myself going back to a non-folding phone for these use cases. Now, would I prefer the crease to be less noticeable? Yeah, of course. But in its current form, it really doesn't bother me. And I'm detail-oriented enough that I know that I can see it in pretty much any situation. I kind of don't care. I kind of really like the immersiveness of that screen. I really like the size of it. I really like the fact that I have it with me at all times. Now, all that being said, Samsung does need to up their game. From what I've been seeing is that other manufacturers are really doing a lot of work to improve that crease. Now, of course, Samsung's still ahead of them as far as the maturity of a folding device as a whole goes, but they're not going to be standing still. So the difficult thing is you kind of got to go all in. If you just go to a store to try to look at it, it's probably going to stand out to you just because you're paying attention to it. You're trying to look for it. And you're not going to realize how little it impacts your use until you're actually using it as your own personal device. On a side note, you can absolutely feel the crease as well, which is a little bit annoying when you're using the S Pen. Though I will say that in Mario Kart Tour, it's actually kind of nice to have a little reference point of where the middle of the screen is. And that's pretty much all I have for you. I mean, really, the only way you can have an opinion about the crease is to live with it yourself, but that's a very expensive option. Your next best bet is going to be to get as many opinions about it as possible. So I'm putting my opinion out there for you to take or leave, but putting it out there so you can have it to help inform your own personal decision for your own personal use case. So until next time, never stop having fun.